Ryan's Office Revenge.
My name is Michael Garrison. I'm 47 years old, and on March 15th, I learned exactly how dangerous it can be when a spoiled heir thinks federal regulations are just suggestions you can ignore. The conference room door slammed so hard the security clearance charts rattled on the wall. Owen Westfield, 19 years old, son of our CEO, heir to a defense contract empire he'd never worked a single honest day for, marched in wearing a $1,000 suit that looked ridiculous on his skinny frame. "You think you can just ignore what I tell you to do?" he yelled, slamming his laptop on the conference table. The morning briefing materials scattered everywhere. "When I give an order, you follow it." I stayed in my chair, checking my watch. 8:47 a.m. Still had 13 minutes before the federal compliance review. "Owen, I don't take orders from junior staff." His face went red like a warning light. "I'm the future CEO of this company." I straightened my collar, feeling that familiar weight of keeping my cool under pressure. "Then I'll follow your orders when you're actually the CEO. Until then," I gestured toward the door with the same precision I'd used directing operations on deck. "Please leave my office." I knew brushing him off like that would come back to bite me. I just didn't expect it to happen that same day. Let me back up to when this whole mess started getting out of control. 3 months earlier, our CEO Howard Westfield announced his son would be joining Titan Defense Solutions for real-world experience. Most of us figured Owen would hang around different departments for a few weeks before getting bored and going back to whatever resort he'd been wasting time at. We were completely wrong about that. Owen got handed the title Junior Operations Director, a position that took me 5 years of post-Navy service to earn. No qualifications, no security clearance training, no clue how federal defense protocols actually work. Somehow in his mind, that title meant everyone reported to him. At first, I tried to keep things professional. I fixed his security violations quietly. I rewrote his dangerous proposals before they reached government clients. I even covered for him when he missed classified briefings. Why? Because I believed in what we were doing. Because I'd spent 18 years building something solid at this company, and maybe because I thought he'd grow up eventually. I was wrong about that too. The breaking point came 2 weeks before that Thursday morning confrontation. Owen barged into my office, dropped a classified file on my desk without following proper containment procedures, and said, "Fast-track the Peterson contract. Skip the background checks." The Peterson contract, a $2.8 million government defense project with strict federal oversight requirements. "I can't bypass security clearance procedures, Owen. Federal regulations don't have shortcuts." His response made my blood run cold. "I'll tell my father you're blocking progress." I met his gaze without flinching. "Go ahead," he stormed out. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought Howard would knock some sense into him, but I'd completely underestimated how far entitled incompetence would go when nobody sets boundaries. On the night of our annual spring client presentation, I was working with Angela Brooks from Government Partnerships, the same federal liaison who'd helped us secure 3 major contracts over the past 2 years. The venue looked great. The government representatives seemed happy. For a moment, I actually believed hard work still counted for something in defense contracting. Then my secure phone buzzed. One message from Howard Westfield. "Michael, come to my office first thing tomorrow morning." My stomach dropped like it used to before dangerous missions. I barely slept that night. By 7:30 a.m., I was standing in front of Howard's desk. "He wouldn't look me in the eye, Michael. I'm afraid I have to." But before he could finish, I leaned forward. "Check your email first." His face went white, because what Howard didn't know was that I'd been documenting everything. Howard stared at his computer screen like it was about to explode. All the color drained from his face. He clicked once, twice, opened the encrypted folder I'd quietly sent him the night before. Inside were 38 documented security violations, every single one traced back to Owen's reckless decisions. There was Owen ordering departments to fake delivery schedules to federal clients. Owen demanding the finance team change numbers to make his forecasts look good. Owen emailing me directly with gems like, "Just do what I say, or I'll make sure you're gone." I stood there silently, letting Howard take it all in. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, letting out a deep breath like he'd been holding it during a depth charge attack. I had no idea this was happening. I kept my voice level, didn't you? He flinched, because the truth was he had known. At least part of it. But turning a blind eye is easier when it's your golden boy breaking the rules. Easier until the proof lands in your inbox. Howard buried his head in his hands. "Michael, why didn't you come to me sooner?" I stayed calm. "Because I thought this company still believed in earning your position. And because I didn't want to be the reason your family fell apart. He looked up, eyes sharp with something between guilt and fear. The board can never see this. I gave him a hard look. I'm not here to threaten you, Howard. I'm here because your son walked into my office yesterday morning and told me to bypass federal security protocols on a $2.8 million government contract. When I refused, he promised to destroy my career. I paused, letting that sink in. I came here because I won't let a 19-year-old kid treat people like garbage while you look the other way. For a moment, the only sound was the low hum of the air conditioning. Then Howard whispered, "What do you want?" I smiled just slightly. I want my career protected. I want my team safe. I want this nonsense to stop before it blows up in your face. As for Owen, that's your problem to solve. I left Howard's office with my heart pounding. It wasn't about getting revenge yet. It was about doing what was right, about making sure hard work and competence still mattered. But by Monday morning, I realized Owen wasn't going to let this go quietly. It started with the silent treatment. Emails I was suddenly left off of, meetings rescheduled without telling me, budget approvals that got delayed for no reason. The subtle art of corporate sabotage. I caught Owen smirking outside a strategy meeting I'd been locked out of. He actually winked at me like he just won some kind of game. Here's the thing about entitled people like Owen. They think power is something they can manipulate like a video game. What they never understand is that sometimes the people they try to step on are the ones holding everything together. A week later, Howard called me back for another talk. "You're right," he said quietly. "Owen's out of control." I raised an eyebrow. "Good, so you've talked to him." Howard looked away. I tried. "He won't listen. He told me if I don't get rid of you, he'll go to the board and cause problems." I actually laughed. 19 years old and threatening board action. That's impressive. Howard didn't think it was funny. "Michael, I'm afraid I have to suspend you temporarily just to calm him down. It's not personal." I stared at him with complete calm. "It's never personal, is it?" He winced. "I'll make this right, I promise." But I already knew he wasn't going to stand up to his son. He was going to sacrifice me, the person who'd built his government contracts division, because it was easier than dealing with family drama. I nodded politely and walked out of his office with my head high. But I wasn't defeated because Howard had no idea what I'd been preparing for months. Walking out of Howard Westfield's office that morning, I wasn't worried, I wasn't even surprised. I'd learned long ago that in corporate life, loyalty often crumbles under pressure, especially when family's involved. But what Owen and his father didn't realize was that I wasn't standing alone. While they were busy plotting my exit, I'd been building something else entirely. 3 months before Owen stormed into my office, I'd noticed things shifting. Clients were getting nervous. Senior managers were asking strange questions about procedures. Several high-level contracts I'd personally negotiated were suddenly being reassigned without explanation. It didn't take a genius to realize Owen was positioning himself to take over the government division I'd built from scratch, and Howard was letting it happen. So I did what my military training had taught me. I started keeping detailed records, every email, every meeting note, every client concern about Owen's behavior. I had a clean, organized file of every reckless decision he made and every cover-up attempt Howard allowed. But I wasn't stupid enough to keep that information to myself. I reached out to 2 people I trusted more than anyone in the company. Sandra Martinez, our head of compliance, and Perry Williams, our senior legal counsel. Both had worked with me for years. Both had quietly expressed concerns about Owen's protocol violations. Over coffee, off-site, I laid out everything I had documented. At first, Sandra shook her head. "Michael, this is career suicide." Perry agreed. "If the board sees this, people are going to get fired." I met their eyes. "They need to see this, not for me." For the company, there was a long pause. Then Sandra leaned in. "I'm with you." Perry nodded. "Count me in too." That's when the real work began. We spent late nights cross-referencing contracts Owen had messed with. We tracked compliance violations that could have triggered federal investigations. Perry drafted confidential reports outlining potential breaches of federal oversight requirements. Sandra discovered that one of Owen's special projects had nearly put us in violation of defense contractor regulations. If I hadn't stepped in quietly 2 months earlier, the fallout could have cost us our government clearance permanently. By the time Howard called me in to announce my suspension, I wasn't worried because the board wasn't going to hear about Owen's security violations from me. They were going to hear it from their own compliance and legal departments through proper channels. But that wasn't the whole picture. The final piece was our largest government client, Eastbridge Defense Contracting. I'd built that relationship personally, and I knew they had serious concerns about Owen after a disaster of a meeting he'd led without me there. So I reached out to Angela Brooks, their head of partnerships. We met for lunch. No pressure, no agenda. But when I casually asked about their plans for future contract renewals, Angela gave me a knowing look. "Michael, off the record, if you're gone, so are we." I blinked. "Seriously?" She nodded. "We don't work with companies run by amateurs. That's a federal security requirement." That was all I needed to hear. By the time my suspension hit the company-wide email, two things happened at the same time. Sandra and Perry submitted their joint report directly to the board, and Eastbridge Defense sent a formal letter of concern to Howard Westfield with a clear warning about pulling future contracts if leadership changes weren't made. I wish I could say I felt victorious, but honestly I just felt ready because Owen Westfield had spent months thinking he could push me out with empty threats and childish games. What he didn't understand was basic logic. You can't defeat people who have nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The official notice hit company-wide email at 9:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. Michael Garrison, administrative leave, pending internal review. No explanation, no details, just a cold corporate sentence announcing that I was basically out. But what Howard didn't know was that the review had already started, and it wasn't about me. At 10:05 a.m., Sandra and Perry submitted their joint report directly to the board of directors. It wasn't dramatic, no accusations, no finger-pointing, just cold, hard facts. Owen Westfield had tried to manipulate federal compliance data multiple times. He had given orders outside his authority, risking contract violations with government clients. He had interfered with security clearance procedures. And Howard Westfield, either through ignorance or willful blindness, had let it continue. The report ended with a simple recommendation. We advise immediate review of leadership accountability and potential breaches of federal oversight requirements. By 11:30 a.m., the boardroom was in complete lockdown. I wasn't there, obviously, but Sandra kept me updated through secure messages. "Howard looks like he's aged 10 years in an hour. Owen tried to blame you for everything. Board isn't buying it. They want answers." I read every message with a strange sense of calm. I hadn't leaked anything to the board myself. I hadn't gone public with complaints. I didn't have to. The truth has its own way of coming to light when you document everything properly. Around 2 p.m., Howard called me. I let it go to voicemail. He tried again. By the third call, I picked up. "Michael, I think we need to talk." I let him sweat for a moment. About my suspension. He let out a heavy breath. About everything. We met in his office late that afternoon. For once, Owen wasn't lurking in the background like some kind of spy. Howard looked completely defeated. The confident CEO mask was gone. "The board wants to meet with you tomorrow morning," he said quietly. I nodded, and he hesitated. "They've asked for Owen's immediate resignation and for me to step down temporarily pending review." I didn't react. Sounds appropriate. Howard gave me a bitter smile. "You really did it. You destroyed him." I met his gaze steadily. "I didn't destroy anyone, Howard. Owen did that himself. I just refused to help cover it up." For a moment, I thought he might explode, but instead, he just slumped forward in his chair. "You were the best operations manager we had," he whispered. "I should have backed you from the start." I stayed silent because at that point, there was nothing left to say. The next morning, I walked into the boardroom I'd never been invited to before. 12 directors, serious faces, all business. But when I sat down, something shifted. They didn't grill me like I expected. They didn't accuse me of anything. They asked for my perspective on what had been happening, and I gave it to them, professionally, calmly, backed up with facts. I told them about the contracts I'd negotiated, the partnerships I'd protected, the security risks I'd prevented when Owen's recklessness created federal compliance threats. I watched as heads nodded around the table with each point I made. By the end of that meeting, the chairman leaned forward. "Michael, we'd like you to consider stepping into an interim leadership role for government operations while we restructure." I could hardly believe it. I wasn't just getting reinstated, I was getting promoted. But even as I shook hands and smiled politely, part of me stayed cautious, because promotions come and go. Titles change, power shifts. But respect, that's something you earn, and it's the one thing Owen Westfield would never get back. 2 weeks after that board meeting, Owen Westfield was gone. No farewell email, no company announcement, just gone. I heard through the grapevine he'd been shipped off to manage family investments overseas. Corporate speak for we're getting rid of you quietly to avoid scandal. And Howard Westfield stepped down voluntarily, citing personal reasons. The company memo thanked him for his service and mentioned his commitment to smooth transition. Translation: we won't fire you publicly if you disappear without making noise. On my first official day as interim director of government operations, I walked past Owen's old corner office, empty, just a nameplate sitting on the desk. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. This wasn't about proving a point. It was about protecting the people who'd been walking on eggshells under his chaotic leadership. I called my team together for a meeting, no fancy speeches, no victory laps, just one simple promise. I don't care about titles or last names. I care about competence, integrity, and treating each other with respect. That's how we move forward together. And for the first time in weeks, I saw real relief on their faces. A month later, Eastbridge Defense renewed their contract. Not because we begged them to, but because Angela Brooks called me personally and said, "We want to work with leaders who know what they're doing. That's you." Other clients followed suit. Deals started closing again. The workplace tension disappeared. The company didn't just recover from the Owen disaster. It started thriving. Then came the final surprise. The board invited me for a private dinner. I wasn't sure what to expect. But sitting there across from people who once saw me as just another department head, I realized something had changed. They weren't looking at me as a temporary fix anymore. They were looking at me as permanent leadership material. The chairman spoke first. "Michael, we'd like to offer you the permanent role of Director of Government Relations, effective immediately." I paused, letting that sink in. "I have some conditions," I said quietly. He smiled. "Let's hear them." I laid them out clearly. Zero tolerance for nepotism in leadership positions. Transparent accountability standards for all executives, full authority to build and protect my team the way I saw fit. My way, no exceptions. The chairman nodded after each condition, agreed on all points. I signed the contract a week later, not for the title, not even for the salary bump, but because I wanted to make sure no one else would have to fight the battles I'd fought just to be treated with basic professional respect. And Owen, the last I heard, he was working on some startup in Singapore, burning through his trust fund and trying to impress investors who could see right through his act within 5 minutes. It's funny how things work out. When you build your whole world on entitlement and intimidation, it all falls apart the moment someone refuses to play your game. Looking back now, I realize something important about what happened. Owen tried to destroy my career because I wouldn't bend federal security rules for him. Howard tried to sacrifice me to keep peace in his family, but neither of them understood something fundamental about real leadership. Genuine authority doesn't come from job titles or family connections. It comes from competence, character, and earning the trust of people who depend on you to do the right thing, and that's something no spoiled rich kid and no weak-willed CEO can ever fake their way through. The whole experience taught me something I hadn't expected to learn at 47 years old. Sometimes the biggest battles aren't fought on foreign soil or in actual combat zones. Sometimes they're fought in conference rooms and corporate hallways where the stakes are just as real even if nobody's shooting at you. 6 months into my new role as Director of Government Relations, I was finally starting to feel like the company had stabilized. The federal contracts were solid, the team was working well together, and we'd rebuilt the trust with our government clients that Owen had nearly destroyed. But the real test of what I'd learned came on a Tuesday afternoon when I got an unexpected visitor. My son Jake walked into my office. He's 22, just finished college, and had been job hunting for a few months. Smart kid, good grades, but like most people his age, still figuring out what he wanted to do with his life. He sat down across from my desk with a serious expression I recognized from when he was little and had something important to ask. "Dad, I've been thinking about what happened here with you and that Owen kid," he said, "and I wanted to ask you something." I leaned back in my chair. "Shoot. Would you hire me here? I mean, not because I'm your son, but because I could actually do the job." The question hit me harder than I expected. Here was my own kid, asking me to consider him for a position, and all I could think about was Owen Westfield and the mess that had caused. But this was different. Jake wasn't asking for special treatment. He was asking for a fair chance, and he was smart enough to understand the difference. I looked at him for a long moment. "What makes you think you'd be good at this work?" He smiled, and I could see he'd been thinking about this seriously. "Because you taught me that respect isn't something you inherit. You earn it by showing up every day, and doing good work. Because I watched what happened when someone thought rules didn't apply to them. And because I'd rather start at the bottom and work my way up the right way than have everyone wonder if I deserve to be there. That's when it really hit me. The difference between Jake and Owen wasn't just about age or attitude. It was about understanding that opportunity is something you honor, not something you're owed. I ended up offering Jake an entry-level position in our logistics department, working under Sandra Martinez. No special treatment, no shortcuts, just the same chance any qualified candidate would get. Watching him over the past few months has reminded me why the whole Owen situation mattered so much. It wasn't really about one spoiled kid or one weak father. It was about protecting a principle that I believe in deeply, that in America, if you work hard and do right by people, you should have a chance to succeed regardless of who your parents are or what your last name is. The military taught me that leadership isn't about having the fanciest uniform or the loudest voice. It's about taking care of your people and making decisions based on what's best for the mission, not what's easiest for yourself. Corporate life tried to teach me something different, that politics and connections matter more than competence. But I never bought into that lesson, and I'm glad I didn't. These days, when I walk through the office, I see something that was missing during the Owen era. People aren't walking on eggshells anymore. They're not wondering if their hard work will be undermined by someone's nephew or if their good ideas will get stolen by someone with better connections. They're just focused on doing good work, which is exactly how it should be. I still get calls from other companies sometimes, headhunters asking if I'm interested in moving somewhere else for more money or a bigger title. But I've realized something important about job satisfaction. It's not about climbing the highest ladder or making the most money. It's about working somewhere that operates according to principles you can respect, with people you can trust to have your back when things get difficult. The defense contracting business is tough. We're dealing with national security issues, federal regulations that change constantly, and clients who demand absolute reliability. There's no room for amateur hour, no space for people who think rules are suggestions. Owen learned that the hard way, and his father learned it too. The federal government doesn't care about your family name when you're handling contracts that affect military readiness. I've been thinking lately about the guys I served with in the Navy, especially the ones who didn't make it home. They fought and died believing that America is a place where merit matters more than privilege, where doing the right thing is more important than taking the easy path. Every time I make a decision in this job, I think about whether I'm honoring that belief or betraying it. The Owen situation tested that belief in a way I hadn't expected. It would have been easier to just go along, to let him play his games and hope someone else would deal with the consequences. But easy isn't the same as right, and I've never been particularly interested in taking the easy path when the right path was available. Looking back now, I realize the whole experience wasn't really about revenge at all, even though it might have looked that way from the outside. It was about accountability. It was about ensuring that actions have consequences, that competence gets rewarded, and that people who work hard don't get pushed around by people who've never had to earn anything. That's a lesson worth fighting for, whether you're 19 or 47 or anywhere in between. Because the moment we stop standing up for those principles is the moment we lose something essential about who we are as Americans. Owen and Howard Westfield learned that lesson the hard way. I'm just glad I was in a position to teach it to them. Some battles are worth fighting, even when the odds seem stacked against you. Especially then, because that's when character really shows, and character is the one thing nobody can take away from you, no matter how much money or power they think they have. The real victory wasn't getting Owen fired or getting promoted myself. It was proving that in America, doing the right thing still matters more than having the right connections. And that's a truth worth defending no matter what it costs you. 25 years from now, when my son Jake tells his own kids about integrity and standing up for what's right, he won't remember the corporate politics or the job titles. He'll remember that his old man chose to fight for principles instead of taking the easy way out, and that's the only legacy that really counts.